Greetings from Delaware. Welcome to the Unity in Humanity Interfaith celebration. We are happy to have you participate today along with our speakers who will be joining us from Arizona, Delaware, Montana, Idaho, and Utah. What a wonderful opportunity for us to gather together from the comfort of our own homes as each speaker shares with us the treasures and perspectives from their culture, religions, and relationships with God. We have muted all participants with the exception of those speaking, and feel free to ask questions via the Zoom chat thread during each speaker. Please use this only for questions for the current speaker, and they will be viewed by and asked by one of the hosts of the meeting. The speakers will line up as follows. The opening prayer and first speaker, Delmar Boni, Rupinder Singh, Jeremiah Padgett, Sugopi, Palakala, and Denver Snuffer. The closing prayer will be given by Brian Zhang. Please join us in prayer with our first speaker, Delmar Boni.
Oh, Heavenly Father, Creator, Great Spirit, blessing to us this morning. We're here in a good way with our hearts and the openness we have for one another and our beliefs in life. Creator, Great Spirit, to the east direction, the color yellow, the color of the sun, the color of the life that you give to us, and the color white, the great mystery, the female color for the woman, for the womb we come from the Mother Earth herself. Be with us, Creator, as we see this come to light. And the color green for all the plant life, the water. The earth is all covered in water. So many percent of the body is contained with water. Water is a vital part of who we are. To all the men in our life, to our fathers, to our grandfathers, to our uncles, to our brothers. And most of all, just be with us in this coloration for the earth itself and the north, the color of the great mystery, the black, the unknown, to the Great Spirit, to the understanding of life, how we are encompassed by this spirit of knowing and being, even though it's the darkest in our times and life sometimes. We know that we are covered by Great Spirit in that way. So be with us like that, Creator. My understanding of life, my sense of being, and the everyday walk in life, that I'm close to you and openness to you. Aho to all my relations. ya ayu. Hidan chong, Etkanani Gusayu. Awayu Shamanda you. Ya ayani, ya aya, ya ayani, ya. Ya ya ayani, ya aya, ya ayani, ya. Ya ayu. Aho, aho. Name is Delmar, Boni. I come from the San Carlos Apache tribe. I've been here for quite a while now. I'm here in respect to this life that we're given, this understanding, this gift that we've been given called life, that we respect it and walk with it in a good way. So as I'm walking on a daily basis, I make this connection to the higher power. I give all of myself to Him, so my day and my way can go out in a very good way, in a way that I'm walking with Him on a daily basis, in respect to all mankind, in respect to this earth, in respect to even the coyotes that howl every morning before the sun comes up, even the owl that goes to sleep in the morning as this day begins, because some of us sleep in different ways, some during the darkness, some during the light, but we're all a product of this understanding in life. So just be with us, Creator God, Great Spirit. I'm very humbled to say a few words to you about this understanding, about this closeness. I was born with my grandparents being ceremonial people within my tribe. And I grew up with ceremonies at the get-go. I was just a little guy, but I was there with all the other elders. I thought I was an elder myself, yet I was a little tiny guy, just mimicking my grandfather and my grandmother. And I swore that those were the most impressive times that I've had in my life. The opening from my grandparents towards me and teaching me in this ceremonial way about the Apache people. I can still see those images along the Gila River up on the reservation, being there in ceremonies with lots of people. That was how my beginning started out there in Bailes. Bailes is a little town on Highway 70 going towards Safford, Arizona, eastern Arizona. That's where I stayed for the first 20 years of my life. And I came down here in the metro area to pursue my education, to pursue what it is I long to be in life, how to help the people with my own gift, with my own understanding. Yes, Creator, Great Spirit, thank you for my walk in life. Thank you for this path in life. I blow this eagle bone whistle because I am in flight too. I am not only walking on life, but I'm in full flight with the message of the people, for the people. And most of all, I learn from the people. I learn from my own mistakes in life. That I thought that I fell down and I even shed tears and it hurt so much. But those were the teachings. You have to fall many times in life to find that there is a way, that there is a directness in that way. Our teachings don't always come in the spirit of sunlight. Sometimes they come tenfold in the darkness, but yet we long for the spirit of the sunlight, and we pray for that. And when we address ourselves on a daily basis, we stand towards the east direction. Way over there, over the desert mountain, the sun comes up. The sun rises and rises, and we sing our morning songs so we can be right there with us in a good way again, to let that sunlight penetrate into our hearts, into our minds, and into the totality of who we are in a spiritual way. To open yourself in a spiritual way towards the sphere of the light is the in-rays, the inward movement into oneself about this light from the Creator, the Great Spirit, God, Heavenly Father. So I was raised up here in eastern Arizona, and I came down here, and I have kids down here. I have 4 daughters that live here, right here in the Phoenix area. They bring forth to me grandkids. They own I was a grandson to my own grandfather. Now I'm doing the same for my own grandkids. Sometimes I think that I'm a grown person, and yet through the eyes of my grandkids, I see the connection again towards that time period in my life. I see that almost taking a journey right back to when I was a little young guy. How I needed affirmation and confirmation from my elders in that way. And now I hear them again as I reiterate the same message to my grandkids. But it's with great pleasure that I'm here. I'm just coming to this, carrying the drum, carrying the medicine, carrying the message of what I have and what I've been with. And it's a real gift that we have. That I'm still walking. I just come on these years now of understanding. And sometimes when I go to ceremony, I see the younger guys, and I see a version of myself sitting there in a younger man. And I question about their sense of being, how they're starting out. Yeah, Creator, thank you for those visuals and those things like that, Creator God, Heavenly Father. I have another song for you, Creator God. That was a song for my teacher. His name is Milford Lazo, Makalero, Apache Reservation. I've had many teachers. Alan Hauser, an Apache from Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I studied under him. I was an apprentice to him. And of course, I was an apprentice to my own grandfather, Duncan Stanley of Bylis. And many other teachers have come across my lineage, as well as the professors and the people that have instructed me for my degree and all that stuff. So the disciplines come from many different ways. Sometimes formally, sometimes it seems like informal. They're in the native teachings. They're an oral tradition, an oral understanding through the way that we see things in life. How we see the tree, how we see the grass, how we see the cactus, and even the roadrunner running out there. We think we can only see him as a cartoon form. Sometimes he is a cartoon. Sometimes as human beings we begin to be an expression of a cartoon. But if we have a sense of humor, then we realize that the Creator, the Great Spirit, has a sense of humor. Because he makes us go through this life looking for all these things in life, these great understandings in life. We go to the mountaintop and we sit there for a long time and see and be with. Sometimes we spend time with an individual. Sometimes we just spend time with just being ourselves, and even complete quiet, just complete meditation, so you can hear the refined things that you're being taught in life. Because some people appreciate this life like that they can be in peace and quiet and in love at the same time. We feel that love is a very action-oriented word, and yet it can be a very self-fulfilling thing in life. In order to love somebody, you have to love yourself first. But the important love is that we have for ourselves, that we appreciate and that we're worth something. By the Creator, listening to Him, then He gives that to us through prayer, meditation, and through song and ceremony. Each night, each Thursday night, we crawl into the womb of the Mother Earth in the form of a sweat lodge, and we bring in the stone people, the grandmother stone, the grandfather stone, and they make their presence in the lodge, and we apply water to it so we can create the essence of life and breathe it in, so we can be in a good way with free from disease and sickness, and be overlooked through by the divine power, the Great Spirit, God, Heavenly Father. So we sing in them. Sometimes we share words, sometimes prayer and meditation. But most of all, it is by being in there and listening to our ancestors, our grandmothers and grandfather stones. They go deep. We think they're just stones, they're rock. But no, we give them that presence of being our ancestors in that way. So I look forward to that on Thursday nights. I look forward to the fellowship we have in there. I look forward to the prayers we have in there. And this way we reassured again, giving the affirmation and a confirmation about the things that we do in life. I just won't say that much at this time. If you have any questions or whatever, I'll turn it back over to Jill.
Thank you so much, Delmar. We'd like to move on to our next speaker. Are you ready, Rupinder?
Yeah, Jill, thank you. I'm ready. Should I go ahead? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Delmar. That was indeed very beautiful. I mean, the music, and I kind of started to resonate with some of the things you were saying of how various kinds of music connect, right? Thank you so much for sharing that. Just a quick introduction, everybody. If you cannot hear me, please do let me know on the chat. And if you cannot understand my accent, again, please let me know. Absolutely, I'll try and go a little slowly as we go through this. Bit of introduction of myself. I'm Rupinder, a software engineer by profession. I work in the artificial intelligence, machine learning division of a major financial firm. At the onset, I would like to say it is a great honor to be here. The very fact that I have so many people who want to learn from others, who want to absorb the ideas, basically just shows how deep their own faith is. And it is wonderful to be in a company of such people. So thank you so much for inviting me to this session. The second thing I want to add is I'm not a professional speaker. I'm just an ordinary engineer practicing Sikh. So I'll try and cover some of the compilations of our teachings in Sikhism. Like any religion, the philosophy and the religion is vast. I mean, this will be like a mere drop in that ocean. So what I try to do is I try to prepare the speech in more of a presentation form, because I'm an engineer by training, I'm an engineer by profession. That's what I'm used to in the corporate world, of how we present ideas and then use them to brainstorm and have a discussion, meaningful discussion and a dialogue. So any questions you have as we go through the session, please absolutely ask, and it will make the session a bit more interactive. I would share my email towards the end. So because this is a new religion for most of us, there would be questions and I would be happy to answer them maybe later on, or I can even connect with them as we go through the session. So with that, I would like to spend just 2 minutes introducing Sikhism and some of the basic tenets of Sikhism. Let me share my screen. Brent, I think I'm disabled. Would you be able to give me access to share my screen, if possible? Brent or Jill? Thank you. There you go. So I would like to take 2 minutes to introduce Sikhism in general, because this is a very, very new religion and not too many people know about this religion. The higher level concepts is outward appearance rather in Sikhism is the men folk tend to wear a turban like the way I'm wearing. That's a unique feature of this religion. In this country so far, the only person I've seen wearing a turban is from a Sikh faith. But the religion is from the Indian school of thought. And when I say the Indian school of thought, what I'm really grouping is the grouping of the origins of the major religions of the world. And one would be the Indian school of thought, and second one would be the Middle East school of thought. So this belongs to that family. We have Buddhism and Hinduism, similar religions. It is monotheist religion. We connect only to God, and that's why this topic is pretty dear. And as we go through this, God is central in us. Everything revolves around God. We don't have a specific form of God. The universe is considered to be one of the manifestations or just one of the forms of God. There are certain tenets of Sikhism, key tenets being having an honest living and sharing about 10% of your everything, which means time, which means salary, and all the earnings you do. And the concept is to attain salvation while you are remaining a family man. So in Sikhism, we don't advocate going into some sort of a mystic or a mysticism kind of a realm. But the idea is to be a normal person, do your duties while trying to march on a journey to attain God. Meditation and then musical hymns are very key in Sikhism. And the last point I would like to add is it is one of the few religions which have combined a deeds or an action-based path with a devotional worship path. So it does share some commonality with the mystic religions, but it's one of the few unique religions where you have both at the same time. So while you're working, you are also doing this. It is a non-evangelical religion. You will not find Sikh people going out and preaching. It is a very inward-looking religion. The concept is to improve your own self. The concept is to keep improving and working on your own shortcomings as you move on into your path towards reaching God. And so because of that, we also believe that the religion you are born in is probably the best path which the Lord chose for you. And so we will not really try and go against what the Lord decides to do for us. We do recognize all prophets who appeared, all prophets who will appear. But those are some of the more deeper thoughts and philosophies, right? Life after death. That is for a different topic altogether. So coming to connecting with God, the literal meaning of connecting to God in Sikhism is actually means to join, which means to become one. So for us, the connection to God means that I have inherently become one with God. I am God, God is me, and I am part of this whole universe. That is our sole purpose of life. That is our sole purpose of this multiple life. We do believe in multiple life forms. We do believe in reincarnation. We do believe that the sole purpose of why you are given a human life is primarily to achieve that unity. It is to keep purifying yourself, to keep refining yourself till the time you reach a state of perfection where you can join and become one with God. The journey to doing this is a very continuous journey. And the journey has many stages. Like any journey, it will have many, many stages. The experiences vary from person to person. And why so? That is, again, a little divergent path, which I will not take today. Why is the journey different for each person? Why are people born differently? And so on and so forth. But essentially, even for the same person, depending on your point of time in life, depending on your situation, depending on your experiences, that connection is different. Sometimes it is strong, sometimes the bond is weakened, and then you again reinforce it. You get help along the way. And by that, what I mean is, in my personal example, for example, I have, I would say I'm blessed and fortunate to have my father be a very big guiding principle in my life. He's deeply connected. I find him to be a deeply spiritual person. And his guidance has always helped us as we move along. A lot of the thoughts which I have really come from his experiences and his distillation of thoughts as we talk often and as we go along. So that is a help which we will get along the way. But the connection is individual. The path has to be walked alone. And that is a key tenet in Sikhism, that no matter what you do, you have to walk the path alone. Now, we believe, like I said earlier, that God exists in everything. He exists in me, he exists in you, he exists in every living and non-living things. The reason anything exists in this world is because God exists in it. So then you get into this point that if God is so near to you, how come we are not so connected to him? And this is an irony. Now, something which is unheard, something that is unseen, and maybe only felt, it is very difficult to connect. It is very difficult to connect to that sort of an entity. So how do we go about doing that? In Sikhism, we think there are two prominent parallel paths. The two prominent parallel paths, I would say, they're intermingled. And as I explained some of these paths and some of these tenets to you, you will go from one to another, vice versa. It's not going up or down. It's a parallel path. It's not forward or back. It's a concept of absoluteness. You can be moving from point A to B, going back and forth, depending on your situation, depending on what is the best point for you at that point of time. The very first stage, or the very first path, which I would say, is of belief, faith, and trust. Now, for people like me, who are very ordinary people, believe it or not, the starting point of trying to establish a connection to God is a problem, is an issue, is some sort of help which I needed. and I'm not able to solve that on my own. So for that, I go back to what, as a child, my guru, my parents, my teachers may have kind of put as a belief in me. We will always resort to that. And somewhere deep down, somebody would have told me that there is a higher power who has all the solutions for your problems. And that is, for people like us, that is a starting point. Because we have a need, we have a problem, and we try to establish that connection. Now, and that is what we call as belief. Now, belief is very fragile. It has a lot of skepticism. It gets reinforced, it gets shattered. As you go along, you get few things, it reinforces your belief. And if you don't get it, it puts that dent or the crack in your belief. But believe me when I'm saying that the strongest belief comes from when your wishes actually get unfulfilled. And this is a very counterintuitive concept, a very counterintuitive notion what I'm putting out there. And why so? And I can give you my personal example. When I was a young child, my parents said, ask to your guru and you will get something. I needed something like it's not available in the US, it's like a scooter kind of thing. And I prayed very hard. I said, God, please give me this. I need some sort of a ride. And I got it in a month. I was overjoyed. I remember it reinforced my belief. I was like, yes, there is a higher power which is looking after me also. I went through the journey a few times. I started thinking, that's interesting. So maybe God is somebody I just have to ask and I get my wishes fulfilled. That's pretty nice. That's pretty good. That is the kind of God which I need. And as I went through that journey, a few things did not get fulfilled. In fact, the most important turning point of my life was when I was trying to get into an engineering college, which I wanted to get into, which I thought is going to shape my destiny and really take me to the path which I want to do. I did not get that. I had studied for it and everything, so on and so forth, but I did not get it. It shattered my belief. But as I went through the journey, I realized why the Lord put me in that specific college, which was not of my choice. It put me on a path which I could not have even foreseen. I could not have even imagined that is possible, even from the best college which I was trying to get into. And when that happened, that is when my belief turned into faith. Because then I realized that he knew, he could see what I could not see. So I started to build a sort of faith in him. And I said that there is a higher power who can do this. Now, in the stage of faith, even if a few things go wrong, that is still okay. You tend to go along. You may say, maybe this is not what I wanted, but he knows what he's doing. And so you tend to go along. Now, in this, there are 4 different kinds of prayers in Sikhism. And you can do that during the belief stage, you can do during the faith stage. The very first is, you just pray to God and ask for something. You don't think in your mind that, do you really deserve this? Is this something which is good for you? So that is the very first kind of prayer in Sikhism. The second prayer is not stage, it is not a dimension, it is just a type of prayer, which is when you're complaining. Now, when I was complaining to God, saying, you did not give me this college, you didn't give me all of this, I was still connected. I was still connected because I was thinking about God. I was talking to God all the time. I was connected. But my connection was of a complaint. And from there, of course, he moved on. And then the next form is, which we call as ardas, which literally means to offer a prayer with some sort of logic. You're saying, hey, Lord, I think I deserve this because I worked so hard. Would be kind if you can bestow this thing for me, and or put me on this path, or do this for me. And that's what we call as ardas. And of course, the fourth one is benti, which means to request humbly, which means you are requesting that in your wisdom, grant me this, and if you think it's not worth it, so be it. And that is your wisdom. And that puts you to the third stage, which is trust. And stage of trust is complete submission. In complete submission, you have total faith, I would say, high level of faith. It's complete trust. There's no questions, there's no demands, there's absolute nothing in your mind what is going on. So that's one path. The second path is what we call as steps. And remember what I said, you can go between these at any point of time in your life, depending on your experiences, depending on your situations. You will actually go from one to another as you move along the journey. Now, the steps which you take to reach this, the very first step starts with self-discipline. Any connection you want to establish with Lord has to start with a self-discipline. And what we call as dharamkand, which is the realm of righteous action. So actions are of three kinds in Sikhism. The actions are of your mind or your thoughts. Actions are by your voice or your speech. And of course, the actions are your bodily actions, which you go out and do in this world. The path of action is where you're doing an action because it is your duty. And that is what we mean, the realm of righteous action. So you are focused on your duty, and that is why you're doing the action. And you're not focused on something else. Now here I would like to show you a small kind of a chart which I drew as I was looking through the actions of thought. And why I say actions of thought? Because your expressions can convey a lot. You can be rolling your eyes over somebody, or you can be looking at somebody with a frowning face. That's an action. You've conveyed an emotion to that person which may be detrimental to that other person. That's just an example. But these are what we call as cardinal sins or cardinal vices. Sorry, not sins, cardinal vices in Sikhism. This is what causes you to lose the connection to God. And we call this as Maya. Maya literally means illusions of this world. And why I say illusions of this world? Because in my life, in my experience, as I've gone through my journey, I reflect on some, I would say, contentious arguments. In corporate world, you will always have contentions as it's a team, as you're going through. I've had so many contentious arguments and so many disagreements, agreements, and battles as we go through our daily life to try and solve the problem. 5 years down the line, when I reflect on it and I see, I'm not sure if that was worth it. At that point, that seemed to think, this is it. This is the end of the world for me, but may not be now. And so this chart, what it shows you is, these are some of the key emotions or in your mind, which take you away from that path. The first is, of course, is your ego. Ego comes in two forms. It's pride, and it is also when you're trying to become a doer. And this we consider as one of our primary vices, which drives all the others. Because if you start from your desires, if you get it, good. If you don't get it, leads to anger. If you get your desire, leads to greed, because now you want more of that. If you get your greed solved, you develop excessive love or attachment. Now you're fearful. You don't want to lose it. So this will bring you down into fear, and which will cause you to do all sorts of sins. In Sikhism, we consider these five to be the root of why sin exists in this world. And sins will come back to you because we do believe in the karma theory. So you are responsible for your actions, and you will get various kind of pains, whether it's body disease, life and death, worldly pain, attachment, you lose your near and dear ones, so on and so forth. But still you are in the realm of righteous action here. So you started to realize some of this. You start to, in your mind, in every action, weigh that action and see, is this I'm doing this because this is my duty, or is this I'm doing this because of one of these desires, excuse me, which is coming up in my mind. From here, as you start to reflect on this, you start to move into what we call as Gyan Khan. And Gyan Khan means the realm of knowledge. You become inquisitive. You start to acquire knowledge. You start to read your scriptures. You start to understand your scriptures. You start to take the company of the holy. You start to talk to learned people who you think can give you guidance. Now in here, you start to develop an awareness of the self, that you are aware of your emotions deep down. You know what is going on, and you try and practice it. Normally, in this stage, we will recommend a lot of meditation. Meditation is key in Sikhism, and mostly the meditation is mindful meditation, what we follow. The literal meaning of meditation in Sikhism is remembrance, to remember something, to remember somebody, and practice. So in Sikhism, it is a combination of both. You are remembering something, it's mindful meditation, and you are practicing it. Now, the very first type of meditation may start with what we call as Kirtan, which is music with holy hymns. Sometimes the music is so mesmerizing. It is so mesmerizing. It takes you into a different world altogether. It takes you into a different realm altogether. That combined with the word of the Lord is a form of meditation, because it puts you in a trance. It calms your mind, it calms your body, it puts you in a situation where you start to lose yourself and you start to remember what you want to do. The second type of meditation then goes in where you take a shabad, or what we call as mantra. You focus on your breath, and you do have a few as you slow down your breathing. Of course, there is various concepts, maybe 10 breaths per minute, etc., kind of thing, as we go and teach some of this. But you're still vocal, you're still speaking that mantra on your with your voice, and it is a little loud. In the third stage, it becomes silent. You're just reflecting on that mantra in your mind, and your breath automatically starts controlling. Your body goes into a meditation stage. You can go into meditation stage during the day, any point of time in the day. It's not a specific time where you go for. The last stage in meditation is where it is continuous. It has gone down into your subconscious mind, and your subconscious mind is in a continuous connected state to God. You're always connected. You may be outwardly doing a work, you may be outwardly doing some talking to somebody, looking at something, but inside you, there is a constant recitation going on. You are connected to God in that sense. Now, when you start to do all of that, we start to move into what we call as Saram Khand. And Saram Khand means bhakti. Bhakti is a central concept in Sikhism. Bhakti is a combination of meditation, worship, and love. It's a combination of all these three. This is the realm of spiritual endeavor. And what I mean by that is two things. One is you start to build a concept of spiritual earning. So in Sikhism, there is materialistic earning, or the worldly earning, which you're going out into the world, you're trying to earn your living, and you're getting paid for it, and use it to buy things which you need for your survival. Parallel to that is a concept of spiritual earning. If I spend 10% of my time every day, whether I read scriptures or I do meditation or I do service to the humanity, service to God, that is all part of a spiritual earning. You start to accumulate that wealth. And that wealth is what carries with you, what you take along as you go along in this. Now, in this stage, the second thing which happens is that, as we say, love for God starts. Before this, God is more of a giver. It's a give and take. I like him because he can give me something. He can bestow gifts to me. If he were not able to bestow gifts for me, maybe I will choose a different God. But in this stage, you have a love for God, even though it's unseen. And the love is of 4 forms. The very first form, which I described, is need-based. It's give and take. I'm doing something for you. You give me something in return. I may say, okay, I'll read 10 times these scriptures during the day, and you give me this in return. It's a nice give and take, but God, in that sense, it's more of a shopkeeper. You're just treating him as a trader. That's all what you're doing. When you move to the next step, you start to sacrifice. What that means is, if I'm taking 10% of my time every day and I'm spending it on God, I could have used that 10% of my time to watch a movie or go out. This beautiful weather today out there, just spend some time, have a good time. But I choose to dedicate that time for God. And that is the sacrifice of time which you're making. And that is the second stage. In third stage is basically where you are starting to, it becomes intuitive to you. It no longer looks as a sacrifice. It looks like as if this is your main destination. This is your main destiny. And you're always constantly thinking, you're always constantly reflecting, you're constantly thinking, am I doing the right thing? How would God reflect on me? You see him all around, you see him everything, you see him watching you, you see him doing everything, whatever you want. And the fourth stage, of course, is where you're soulmates and you are connected permanently to him. And this goes for any relationship. Any relationship we have, whether it's my friend, whether it is my teacher, whether it's my parents, whether it's my guru, you typically will have these 4 stages. And God is no different from in connection from that standpoint. Now, in this stage, you will have what we consider, you will undergo various tests. And you are tested to see your purity. And the purity means your purity of your mind. How pure you are in your mind, how stable you are in your mind, and how can you look at your issues and not really get perturbed. And that is very important, because if we think from perspective of God at our very level, which is very low, he's responsible for the whole universe, not just me. He's responsible for every living and non-living thing which exists. He has to take care of everything. So his decisions are absolutely perfect. So if we want to merge in him, we have to start becoming like him. So you undergo those tests. One, it proves to you that maybe you are ready or you're not ready for that connection. There's no hypocrisy here. There's no liking for hypocrisy. There's no liking for rituals. If I'm just sitting in meditation because it's a ritual and I'm looking at the time all the time, hey, is it my 10% is done? Can I move? Can I go watch that movie? That's a ritual. In this stage, you move away from that. And you let go of your ego. And I said the very word in Sikhism for ego is home, which means doer. You think of yourself as a doer. And when you remove that point, you do not think of yourself as a doer, but you think Lord as a doer. It changes the whole equation. It changes the whole way you are thinking. It changes the whole way you are actually acting in this world. Because then you are just watching the play unfold. You're just watching this whole universe unfold. Mankind has been here for millions of years. The earth is like 4 billion years old. Mankind may have been here for millions and millions of years. And you're just watching the play unfolds. Our lifetime, maybe 100 years, maybe 150 years, or 70 years, whatever, is a mere drop in that ocean of time. So you remove yourself as a doer and you start thinking of God as a doer who's been responsible for this whole earth for the last 4 billion years. And then you start thinking that, I'm just a mere drop, not even that. And from there, you start to move into what we call as Karam Khand, which is the realm of grace. And you start to walk in the will of God. Because you realize your will is so limited. and the will of the Lord is infinite. You could be imposing your will for maybe a year, 2 years, maybe you are a king for 70 years, 80 years, but that's it. The Lord has been imposing his will for the last 4 billion years. And this is not the first time the universe has been created. This is not the last time the universe will be created. It is a cycle. It's a cycle which keeps going on and on and on. So you start to realize that, and you start to walk in what we call as the will of God. You start to walk on his path. You start to accept his will without question. And that is what we call as Karam Khand, which is the realm of grace. And grace starts to fall on you. Final stage from there is what we call as Sachkhand, which is the realm of absoluteness. This is the final stage where you are what we call as Mukt, or what we call as free. Now, most of us think we are free people. And I beg to differ. We are in bondage of our own mind. We are in bondage of our own desires. We are not free. And when I say that, I basically would like to show you this picture which I drew. I need a promotion, so I start working towards it. I need a better car, so I start to work towards that whole notion of earning more money and so on and so forth. I am just putting myself in bondage. You do not need anybody to put you in that situation. Your mind is the only thing which puts you in there. So what does it mean to achieve salvation? I mean, if you get salvation after death, what's the point? You don't even know. You can't even see. The point is to get salvation while you are in this life. And so when I start to think about that, I start to think about, okay, what does it mean to be free? If I'm completely free from my desires, completely free, nothing in this world can perturb me. Nothing. Because everything is happening with the will. Everything is happening for the good. I'm doing my duty I'm doing my actions as my duty. You are bound to your action. You cannot escape it. You cannot say, I'm just going to sit there. That is still a verb. You are still sitting. You cannot be no action. So when you get into that state of calmness, when you start to get that state of tranquility, that is salvation. And if you look at this picture here, this is a picture of water which is completely calm. There is not even a single motion happening in that water. That means there is no thought going on in your mind. Even one desire, this one drop which you see here, even one desire which falls into this will create ripples. And these are the ripples which essentially go out and go into this whole world. These are ripples of your desires. These are ripples of your actions as you're going out to this world and living through them. If you can avoid them, you will automatically get into a state of salvation. You'll automatically get into a state of tranquility. You'll automatically get into a state of bliss where nothing bothers you. Neither pain, nor suffering, nor anger, nor desire. And that is what we call as salvation in Sikhism. So with that, I'd like to end the presentation. I've already ended the presentation. I know this religion is new and people may have questions. Please absolutely feel free to ask, or I will share my email, and if there's some more questions post this, absolutely you're welcome to ask, and if I can answer, I will try and do that.
Thank you so much, Rupinder, for your incredible talk. I do have a couple of questions here that have come in. What is the difference between a teacher and a guru?
Yeah, that's a good one. Now, a guru is a person who can connect you to God. And he is a person who essentially takes you into his realm. A teacher is a person who can give you instantaneous guidance. A guru is a person who sees all, who basically chalks out your destiny. He's an architect of a destiny. A teacher is a person more like what we call as a counseling session. So he can be a coach, and that's what a teacher is. He can take a specific problem and try to find a solution to that, but he cannot be your what we call as your master. So that is a slight difference. So in my case, for example, my father is my teacher. In fact, to a large extent, even my wife is my teacher, and she does meditations, and I've learned a lot from her. My father has like 11 hours of routine a day he spends in meditation and prayers and scriptures, and I just see him and wonder, and I go through that. So these are, I would consider, teachers, not gurus from that standpoint. So the second question, I think, was why you don't cut your hair. Jill, is it okay if I just run through the questions I can see on the chat?
You can, if you would like to do that, go ahead.
Sure, absolutely. Why we don't cut our hair is we like to retain the form in which God created us. And that is a primary reason. Now, there are two specific reasons of this. One is when a religion was born, we underwent a lot of persecution. It was a new religion. We were persecuted and slaughtered. We've had two major holocausts in our religion, and at one time about 25% of our population was just wiped out as part of that. So our religion has been seeped by what we call as blood of the martyrs. But our religion says self-defense is your right. You cannot be a sheep. You have to stand up for yourself. And so when you're standing up for yourself, right to bear arms is part of that. Now, coming to here, why I'm saying that is because when you're going into battle in medieval worlds, in medieval times, you would have seen people put on masks to make them look more fierce. So when you see a Sikh soldier, with a turban, his height becomes longer. He sees beard flowing. He's riding a horse with sword in his hand. It looks fearsome. So it helps you in battle. That's one. And the second thing is we like to walk in the will of God. So we don't like to change whatever God has given us. And that is the reason why we don't cut our hair. Why do we wear a turban? So why we wear a turban is because turban is a symbol of royalty in Indian context. So most of the kings in India, so most of Western kings wear a crown, for example. Most of the Indian kings actually wore a turban, and then we would have all sort of decorations on them. Now, the turban is a symbol of royalty. So when our religion was born, we consider everybody to be equal. There is no distinction. There's no high and low. There's no rich and poor. So our guru said, everybody wears a turban because we are all kings, we are all nobles. There is no high and low. So that is a symbolic meaning. And plus it is a way for us to, cover our head. The third reason is when we are in front of our elders in the Indian tradition, and this is specifically Indian tradition, is we like to cover our head as a symbol of respect, as a symbol of respect to our elders. And we consider God to be one of our elders. So we always like to wear a turban as a symbol of respect. So it is spiritual. It is also for connection. Now, it actually establishes connection to me. And I can tell you this because when I walk down the street, when I walk down a mall, for example, I'm the only guy wearing a turban. And because I'm the only guy wearing a turban, I am extremely self-aware of my every action. When I walk into a store, I'm very aware of myself. I'm aware people are looking at me because I look different. I don't expect anything, but it is because I kind of understand that. And that gives me a higher degree of, I'm representing Sikh when I'm going outside. I'm not representing myself. I'm not Rupinder Singh. I'm a Sikh gentleman walking outside. And what that does is it puts my mind into a different state because now I'm responsible for my actions, not just for myself, but for my community. So every action I do, every word I speak, am I polite? Am I not? Am I treating the other person with respect? It is a reflection on my community. So the turban actually helps me to connect more to God from that standpoint. What do Sikh use for scriptures? We have a holy book called as Guru Granth Sahib. And in our religion, we consider our holy book to be a guru. So our 10th master, he bestowed guruship on our Guru Granth Sahib. It's a compilation of all the writings of our Guru Sahib. It is also a compilation of many Hindu saints. It is also a compilation of some Muslim saints also. The reason of choosing them was the concept in our religious book is primarily of what is God, how do you love God, and how do you connect to God. That's all what is answered over there. And so any hymn which is on that lines is basically what our scriptures will contain, and that's what we treat as a guru. So I wish I could show you a picture of my home where we have the holy book in our home. We treat it like a guru. In the morning we'll bring it out, open it, and then what we'll do is the top left, we will top left corner, we will read the verse or the passage, and that becomes like the command of a guru for the day. And the guru tells us, today make sure you don't get angry, or you continue love for God, so on and so forth. Now the book is written in abstract poetry form, and because it is in a poetry form, it is abstract. Every day you read the verse, it has a different meaning because of your situation, because of the way your current form is. It'll actually put you in a different situation. So reading this verse again and again every day just gives you a different answer altogether, and that is what we mean by scriptures. The next, thank you, Philip. The next question is: if you receive salvation, is it an event, self-realization, or does it declare from that you received it? Salvation is self-realization, and by self-realization, if God exists inside of me, but I can't feel it, I can't see it, I can connect to it, I'm not in salvation. The moment I establish that connection, I come in the state of salvation. So salvation is more of a state rather than an event. But a salvation is not a fixed time. It's like from 11 a.m. onwards, I'm in salvation. It's a slow blend as you get into that stage where you merge with God. It's like river merging in the ocean. When the river water merges in the ocean, the river water does retain its properties for a few miles, I think, depending on the size of the rivers. And this is scientific fact. After those few miles, the river water and the ocean water, there's no difference. And that is what we treat, that is how we look at salvation. For us, that is salvation. You're merging in the God slowly as you go through that process. And that is how it is. Our sole focus, this life, is to achieve salvation. If you walk on that path, and what I explained to you as a spiritual earning, if I don't do my spiritual earning, I have no right to even think that I'm going to get salvation. Just by saying, hey, I'm a Sikh, doesn't mean anything. I have to walk the path. And this is being an individual journey, I have to walk the path myself. People can teach me, but unless I do that, I cannot expect it, and I will not get it. And the reason I'm still here, even after millions of lifetimes, because probably all of us got created at the beginning of the universe, and we are still going through this life and death cycle, is because we have not yet reached that point of salvation. Can you share your presentation via email? Absolutely. I would create a PDF, and I would be more than happy to share the presentation, and that you get my email address, and any follow-on questions, you will get it back. Do gurus know why God blessed America above every other nation? It is a point of view. It is a point of view in time. 2000 years ago, Rome was the biggest empire in the Western world. 2000 years ago, Indian empires were undefeated. When Alexander the Great invaded India, he fought a very small king in the northern side of Punjab, where I come from, and his army retreated from there. He could not face the main Indian army, which was Magad, or what we call as modern Bihar at that point of time. So it is a point of view in time. Time is a great destroyer. In the history of mankind, nations have risen, nations have fallen. Nations have ceased to exist, and nations will cease to exist. Nations will get created, and the cycle just keeps going on and on. So in our modern time, America is the greatest nation. And the reason I think America is the greatest nation is because of the superb work culture. When I see people working here, it is awe-inspiring. It's awe-inspiring. The professionalism, the dedication to work, the attitude they bring to work is phenomenal. That is what makes this nation great. The other side of this nation, which I call as a social culture, where some of the events we see happening unfold in our country, now the recent events especially, may not be an example of a great nation. And that is an example of what we call as maybe a thing to work on. So it's hand in hand. It's both ways. That's how I would look at it. Of course, I could be wrong, and please, I would happily take this on. Now, it's happy to see Sikhs wear practice turban.
Actually,
thank you so much. Sorry, Jill.
Thank you so much for to be able to answer so many questions today. And I appreciate your time. We're going to head on to Jeremiah next. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jill. It's a pleasure. It's a wonderful pleasure.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, Jeremiah. We have you. Sorry about that.
That's all right. I wasn't sure if I was working right or not.
Go ahead and start when you're ready.
Okay. I guess just a real brief introduction to how I came across this story. Jill had asked me to share a story with you all. And I guess in my mind I was thinking about where I picked and how I picked this story. So I wanted to share that with all of you guys. I guess consider the source. And for me, it was in 1996. In the summer of 95, I had attended a traditional Blackfeet ceremony called the Medicine Lodge. And then in the winter or spring of 96, I was attending a Stone Child Community College, and we went to a learning conference called the AHEC, American Higher Education Consortium, and I presented a serious oral interpretation speech there. And I selected this story called The First Medicine Lodge that I had discovered in a book written by an author, George Bird Grinnell. The book was entitled Blackfeet Lodge Tales, I believe is the name of the book. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Grinnell. I also wanted to give a shout out to obviously my ancestors of my Blackfeet heritage for sharing this story with Grinnell and him being there to record it. And so this past week I was kind of trying to revisit that story and thinking where I had why I had selected to edit some of the parts for time because of the presentation I had made. Well, you guys can go ahead and look at that story and compare it. In my revisiting of this story, I realized that my version has some little bit of discrepancies from the book, but the details are all pretty much the same. So I guess I'll just peel into the story. A great many winters ago, or a great many years ago, the Blackfeet were living a peaceful lifestyle. There weren't any wars. They didn't fight with neighboring tribes back then. And there was a head chief who had a beautiful daughter. The chief's daughter was so beautiful that many young men had approached her and asked to marry her, but she had turned all of these matrimonial requests down. And it got to a point where the chief started to become concerned that he wouldn't be able to marry his daughter off. So he asked her why, and her response to him was that she had promised herself to a sky being. In this same camp, then there was also a young boy who was orphaned and often ridiculed because of his appearance. He had been born encumbered with a scar across his face, and so he was often ridiculed and called Scarface because of that, his appearance. The orphan boy lived in the lodge of his grandmother, and it was often, like I say, it was often the point of ridicule by other boys, and they were teasing him one day, and they told him he should go ask that beautiful young chief's daughter to marry him. Now he came and mustered all of his courage, and he asked the young lady when she went to gather water one day. He saw her approaching, and he asked her to marry him, and she said that she would marry him, but he would have to get permission from the sun, that he would have to remove that great scar from his face, and then she would know that he had talked to the sun and had permission to do so. So at the first part of what she was saying, he was delighted. But then the rest of what she said sunk in, and he realized that he was going to have to try to seek out the sun's lodge. So he started to inquire, and nobody seemed to know how to help him find the lodge of the sun. He told his grandmother he was going to go on a journey, and if she would help him to get him some moccasins and some food stores for his long trail. He took off on his journey and headed towards the west, and he camped on a butte that first night, made himself a bed of stones, and he wept and he prayed. And just before the sun rose that night, a voice came to him, and it told him not to give up, to keep going on his journey. And he kept endeavoring, and he came across on his trail, he came across some different animals, and he would ask them if they knew where he could find the lodge of the sun. The first one he came across was a wolf on the prairie, and the wolf said that he didn't know where he would end up going, and that he knew that the sun didn't live on the prairie or in between the prairie and the forest. Maybe he should try to ask the grizzly bear, the wolf suggested. And ever westward, he's continuing on his journey, and each night he continues to make this bed of stones and weep and pray. And every dawn, just before the sun rises, a voice tells him not to give up and to keep going. And so he does. He finds the bear, and the bear cannot help. The bear explains that he's been to the top of the mountain and the edge of the forest and plains, and that the sun's lodge is nowhere in those places. And maybe he should ask the badger, the bear suggests. And when he comes across the badger, then the badger explains that he doesn't get very far from his hole in the ground, and that he doesn't know where he's gonna find this lodge of the sun at. Ever westward, Scarface has continued the journey, and he now finds himself on the edge of a great water that's so vast he can't see the other shoreline. And at this point, he's devastated. He's traveled so far and gone so long that he can't see himself continuing to get across this great water, and he almost gives up. He starts to cry, and he hears a voice that asks him why at the end of such a long journey would someone be so sad. And he opens his eyes and he sees that there's a crane there. And the crane, once he finds out what Scarface's intentions are, he says, well, I think I know somebody that can help. And he instructs Scarface to wait and bring that somebody back to help. The crane holds true to his word, and he brings back with him the chief of the crane people. And the chief of the crane people is willing to help Scarface to get to the lodge of the sun. He tells him that it's a dangerous journey, and that he'll have to close his eyes. So as the sun sets across the edge of the great water, then Scarface mounts onto the backs of the two cranes, and they ascend into the sky country where the sun's lodge is on the rays of the setting sun. When Scarface is told that it's safe to open his eyes, he does so, and he finds himself in an unrecognizable place. The cranes tell him to follow the trail that they've led him to, and that will lead him to the path of the sun. Not very far down the trail, Scarface comes across some fine clothing and a bow and arrow. A bow that's really, really fancy, and the arrow and quivers are straight, and this is really really nice stuff that someone must be missing. So Scarface leaves it alone, and he gets a little farther down the trail, and he comes across a strikingly handsome young man who's looking for his things. That Scarface tells him where they are, and that he had left them alone because he knew someone would be missing them. And the young man tells Scarface after this that he is the morning star, and that the sun is his father and the moon is his mother. And since Scarface is looking for the lodge of the sun, he will take him there because he's a good-hearted young man who doesn't touch other people's things. The morning star takes Scarface to the lodge of the sun, and the moon welcomes him, greets him kindly, and gives him some food to eat. When the sun gets home that day, he knows someone is in his lodge, and he knows why he's there. And he explains to Scarface that he's going to help him. He's going to allow him to marry that young girl. But he wants him in return to do something in exchange. He wants him to take this ceremony back to his people. The sun explains that if the people continue to practice this ceremony in the future, they will not have suffering or sickness. If they fulfill these promises to the sun, then their people will live long lives, have good health. So then he stays there and learns these many strange things from the sun. For quite a while he stays there. The time comes when Scarface grows lonely and he wishes to return to his camp of his people. That's when the sun instructs the moon to cover Scarface with white buffalo robes. She does so, and before he comes out from under the robes, the moon paints his face. After he comes out from under the robes, they wipe the paint off. The moon covers Scarface 3 more times. So each time he comes out from underneath the robes, a portion of the scar is removed with the paint. Now Scarface is identical to the fine, handsome young man Morningstar. So identical that when the moon presents the 2 young boys before the sun and asks the sun to choose his own child, he mistakenly chooses Scarface for his own. The sun instructs Scarface to close his eyes, and when he opens them, he finds himself camped right there where he'd made his first camp on that butte not far from his people's village. When he returns to the people in the camp, they're all excited to hear the story of where he has been and what he has learned. And right away, they get ready in preparation for that first medicine lodge. Scarface lives to be a wise old man. He has many children who have many grandchildren. He gets to marry that chief's daughter, and she becomes the first medicine woman for sponsoring that medicine lodge. When Scarface dies, he returns to the sky country, and he can be seen in the dawnscape as the false morning star. So that is my adaptation of George Bird Grinnell's adaptation of the Blackfeet First Medicine Lodge. And thank you for the time and allowing me to share it with you all.
Thank you, Jeremy, so much for your story. I do have a question here. When you talked about this Scarface receiving instructions from the sun, are there more stories in the Blackfoot tribe about the lessons and the teachings that Scarface got from the sun? Or was it that he brought the sweat lodge and the sun dance down, and that's what he learned from the sun?
There are a lot more, not so much stories, I guess, Jill. It's more like practical instruction. Kind of like what Delmar was talking about when he says, well, you're learning, but it's not always somebody specifically telling you, oh, you're learning this because of that. So a lot of times, like for myself anyway, then it's been that I've experienced something, I've participated in something, and I don't really know why until way later. So yes, there are more, I guess, teachings, but they're not necessarily written down. And you don't always know why until you've actually experienced it yourself.
Great, thank you. There's another question here. It says, are the stories that are passed down intended to have deeper meanings and interpretations over time?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that, I guess I could kind of bounce off of what the last speaker was saying when he said it's a snapshot in time. You know, it means something different to each listener in that particular moment of time. You know, you may hear the story at age 5, and I'm sure it could be interpreted by the same listener at age 25 and then again at age 65 and have different meaning each time.
Thank you. Are there any more questions before we move on? I'm looking, just a moment, Jeremiah. How much do you think that the stories change over time, Jeremiah? If they're passed down in oral tradition, is there an expected amount of change that takes place over time, or is the original story held on to sacredly as very specific?
I would say that they change quite a bit over time. Just thinking about, excuse me, too much coffee. Just thinking about the research I've done in the last week, trying to remember where I picked this story from. I came across 3 different versions of the same story written down, and then realized, oh crap, my version is different from all 3 of these. So then I had to think of influences, I guess. Those influences surrounding us right then are also going to lead to that change or that adaptation in the story. I would say the main points, the real main focuses of the story are going to be there, but some of the subtle little details might evolve to something different that's more pertinent to the people hearing or telling the story at that time.
Okay, thank you. Oh, it looks like we got one more. I was going to stop. It says, how important is it that everyone accept the same interpretation of the story? It seems like a remarkably flexible tale.
So I think that's kind of what I was just saying initially, is that it means something different to every listener, and it probably means something different to every teller. So I would say that it's probably more important to have your own interpretation rather than a universal one. At least that's my interpretation of it.
Okay. Thank you so much for speaking today, Jeremiah. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you guys are all welcome. Thanks for having me. It's been a privilege and an honor to share this story with you all.
Thank you, Jeremiah. All right, we are ready for you, Sugopi.
Hi everyone, I'm honored to be in this gathering where we all share our different traditions, and I would also like to thank Jill for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I'm going to share my screen. You can all tell me if you see it. So, Jill, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen, Sugopi.
Okay. So, I would like to start off with a few prayers of invocation, thanking our previous teachers for passing down an unadulterated message of love of God to us, so we can learn from it today. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So the title of my presentation today is Reconnecting with the Supreme. When someone hears this, you may think, why did I use the word reconnecting? Because our topic today was how we can individually connect with God and how God can connect with us. So originally, we were all connected to God, whom we call Krishna. In fact, our identity was defined in terms of Krishna. In one of our main scriptures called the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is stated, Jivere Swarupa Hoy Krishnera Nitya Dasa, which means it is the living entity's constitutional position to be an eternal servant of Krishna, because he's the marginal energy of Krishna and a manifestation simultaneously one with and different from the Lord, like a molecular particle of sunshine or fire. Furthermore, Krishna himself, God himself, states in one of our other main scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita, that the living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. So at some point, when we used to live in the spiritual world where Krishna lives, we got the desire to go against our identity. We no longer wanted to be servants. We wanted to become controllers, lords, and masters. And in the spiritual world, we are all servants of Krishna, so it wouldn't be possible for us to be masters and lords there. So he created this material world for us to experiment with our desires. And he sent us here. But what ended up happening once we came here is that instead of being servants of God, we became servants of our senses. And we also became prey to things like lust, anger, greed, madness, and illusion. We took millions of lives, and controlled by the material nature, we accumulated a lot of dust in our hearts, covering our true identity. So, through good fortune, when some of us ultimately realize that we need to become religious and make God the center of our lives, we don't need to establish a new connection, but just uncover an existing one. Though there are many methods to reconnect with God, the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition uses a few main methods today. But the basic principle is to remember God constantly, always, morning, afternoon, and night, and then we will be united with him. So, in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, we consider there to be 4 ages in time, and right now we're in the age of Kali, or the age of iron. And one of our scriptures says, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Namaiva Kevalam, Kalau Nasteva, Nasteva, Nasteva Gatiranyatha, which means that in this age of Kali, which is characterized by quarrel and hypocrisy, there is no other way, no other way, and no other way to attain deliverance but to chant the names of the Lord. So this chanting the names of the Lord is the process that's recommended for this age to reconnect with him. Even in our world today, calling someone's name is a very efficient and personal way to get their attention. By chanting his names, we can communicate with Krishna and deepen our connection with him. So one may be thinking now that there are many names of God, there are many mantras that we can chant. So we focus on one specific mantra, which is called the Maha Mantra. Maha means great, and mantra means that which controls the mind. So we chant the greatest mantra, and that mantra is as follows. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I'll explain a little bit about what these words mean here. So Hara is the feminine energy of the Lord. This is one unique aspect of our tradition, that we have both a heavenly father and a heavenly mother. And when you call someone in the vocative in Sanskrit, the Hara changes to Hare, so it's just like calling out to her. And Krishna, as I mentioned before, is a name of God, which means all attractive. And then Rama is also another name of him. So even when you call out to someone, there are many different ways you can say their name. You can say it like you're ordering them to do something. You can say it when you're angry in a different way. You can say it when you're calling them out of affection in a different way. So there's a specific mood with which we should chant this mantra. We should chant this mantra in a mood of calling out to our parents. When a child cries out for his or her mother, it's very genuine and very sincere, and it's not mixed with anything else. Like, it's a very pure relationship. So similarly, we should call out to the Lord when we chant in the same way. So here I have a picture of our founder, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, and this is a quote from him telling us how we should chant this mantra.
Excuse me, Sugopi.
Yes, Jill?
Can you please move your screen forward? Your slideshow.
So you're not seeing it?
Prabhupada.
I did. Maybe it's just taking time.
Can you hear me, Sugopi?
Can you hear me, Jill? Hello?
Sugopi, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Jill. I'm not sure what's wrong. I'm unmuted.
Can you progress your slideshow forward so that we can see the picture of the Maha Mantra and the beads and Prabhupada?
I've been sharing it, but I guess it's not working. I'll stop and reshare again.
Okay.
Jill, can you see it now?
Thank you, Sugopi. That's perfect.
Okay. I'll ask from now when I switch to every slide if it's visible. And can you hear me okay too?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So here's the quote. The chanting is a spiritual call for the Lord and his energy to give protection to the conditioned soul, like the genuine cry of a child for its mother's presence. Mother Hara helps the devotee achieve the Lord Father's grace, and the Lord reveals himself to the devotee who chants this mantra sincerely. So we have two ways of chanting this Maha Mantra. The first way is on prayer beads. Can everyone see the picture of the prayer beads?
Yes, we see it. Thank you.
So these prayer beads have this whole, basically like rosary string, has 108 beads on it. And on each bead, we chant the whole mantra once. So Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And then you move on to the next bead. And when you complete all of the 108 beads, that is called one round. And strict practitioners in the Hare Krishna movement, they chant 16 rounds like this every day. It takes about 2 hours, so usually we're recommended to do it before sunrise, 1.5 hours before sunrise, and it's meant to be done with full concentration, not doing anything else, just focusing on hearing the mantra and chanting. And then the next method is called Kirtan. Kirtan literally means glorification. So this is glorification of Krishna and his energies. And here again, I have pictures of our founder doing Kirtan. Kirtan is done as more of a musical presentation. So the lead singer sings the whole mantra. There are hundreds of melodies in which you can sing it. And then the audience responds. And it's accompanied by instruments such as the kartal, harmonium, and mridanga. Mridanga is a traditional Bengali drum, and kartals are cymbals. But one interesting thing is also Kirtan can be adapted to whatever instruments that the country which it's being practiced in has locally. Kirtan can be done with guitar and things like that too. So, but the main purpose of this is, again, calling out to Krishna and asking him to reconnect us with him and to protect us. And just by seeing the pictures I've put here, you can see how seriously the founder is calling out to the Lord. His eyes are closed, and you can see the genuinity in the way he's doing it. This is usually done communally, but you can also do it personally, like he's doing here, just you and the Lord and calling out to him. You don't really need to have someone responding all the time. So while these practices are very nice to do, all of us, even serious practitioners, they may do 2 hours of japa in the morning and 2 hours of kirtan in the evening. But what about the rest of the 20 hours of the day? We have to do things to maintain ourselves, to survive in this world, when we can't be just sitting down for the whole day remembering the Lord through this chanting. While that would have been nice, it's not completely possible in this age. So I would like to talk to you about another scripture that we have, which is called the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam was narrated by a great devotee called Shukadeva Goswami to a very prominent king who renounced everything that he had to hear about the glories of the Lord 7 days before he was to die. So in that book, Shukadeva Goswami explains how this whole material manifestation is a form of the Lord. So he exists eternally in the spiritual world where we came from as a person full of eternity, knowledge, and bliss, but he also has various other manifestations, various other incarnations, and one of those is this Virata Rupa manifestation in the material world. So this helps us see everything in relation to him, and I will give you a few examples of what Shukadeva Goswami said. So in one of the verses he said, "Varieties of birds are indications of his masterful artistic sense. Manu, the father of mankind, is the emblem of his standard intelligence, and humanity is his residence." So I wanted to specifically focus on the birds that are mentioned in this verse. So this is a very practical way to remember the Lord, whether you're looking out of your window, you're walking out of your workplace to go back home, or whether you're just outside. When you see a bird, you can appreciate how beautifully the Lord created this world and how he's the topmost artist. We may see many artists in this world, but he's the topmost artist by creating so many beautiful birds. So you don't need to be necessarily sitting there and chanting at this time, but even when you're doing anything else, when you see God's creation, you can remember him, that the person behind all of this is God. And one of the most beautiful birds that there are is the peacock. I thought we could do a little observation here of how beautiful the peacock is. You can see how many colors there are here. Its body is dark blue, and then there's almost like every shade of green here, from light green to dark green. And even the contrast is so nice. It's not just like random colors. When you don't put the right colors together, it may not look nice. But here, the feathers, there's light colors, light blue, dark blue. There's a yellowish green and a brown. And so when you look at something so beautiful like this, it's not hard to appreciate the talent of the person who made it. So we can easily remember the Lord when we see his beautiful creation. The next one is the terminations of days or nights are his dress. So what is meant by the terminations of days or nights here is sunrises and sunsets. So what I was thinking when I read this is that if his dress is so beautiful with so many nice colors, imagine how beautiful he would be. And no matter where you live, you can always see a sunrise or a sunset, whether you have a church to go to or a temple to go to or not. Still, you can see his creation, you can see the sunrise and sunset and appreciate how beautiful his dress is. The next one is his mind is the moon, the reservoir of all changes. You can go out at night and see, especially on full moon days, it's very calm and peaceful. And then you could just sit there and there's no disturbance. You can just meditate on the moon and how it's the Lord's mind. So far I've explained how we can connect with God, but obviously connection is not a one-way process. How does God reciprocate that connection? How does he connect with us? So to explore this topic, I would like to tell you a story of a 5-year-old boy who has been missing. And he's no ordinary 5-year-old boy. He was the son of the emperor of the world. So why is he missing? Where did he go? And what was he doing? Let's explore these questions in the next few minutes. So the boy that I just showed you a picture of is the child prodigy Dhruva. Dhruva literally means determination, and throughout this story you can see why he has this name. So the emperor of the world, his name was Uttanapada. He had 2 wives, Suruchi and Suniti, but he didn't treat them both equally. Suruchi was his favorite, and her son, Uttama, was also his favorite. Dhruva was the son of Suniti, so he didn't get as much attention from his father as Uttama did. One day, the king was very affectionately caressing Uttama and putting him on his lap, and as any child would naturally want to do for their father, Dhruva also wanted to sit on the lap of his father. But when he was trying to do that, King Uttanapada wasn't very responsive. He didn't really appreciate that. And immediately his wife Suruchi said, "My dear child, you do not deserve to sit on the throne or on the lap of the king. Surely you are also the son of the king, but because you did not take birth from my womb, you are not qualified to sit on your father's lap." So thus insulted, Dhruva was burning with rage. He was very angry at what had happened to him at such a young age, and he went rushing to his mother's palace. And when he explained to her what happened, she felt very great grief. And she was feeling actually the same feelings as him. The Srimad Bhagavatam describes it. She felt the same way as he did. But she explained to him that this is my misfortune, that unfortunately I'm not the favorite wife of the king, and he has been neglecting me, and you're my child. So I feel really bad for what's happening to you, but who you should ask help from is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, because he's the ultimate protector, he has the most power, and he can help you much more than I can. Dhruva took this very seriously. Right then, the very night, he disappeared from the palace, and he went to the forest where all the other sages and great yogis and munis used to meditate millions of years ago to find the Lord. So he went there with a desire. He wanted to find the Lord and ask for a kingdom greater than his great-grandfather. And his great-grandfather was the creator of this universe, Lord Brahma. And he wanted a kingdom greater than that. So on his way, he met a great sage called Narada Muni. Narada Muni is a very great devotee of Krishna. He's very knowledgeable and very advanced. So he met Dhruva and he said, "What's wrong? You're only 5 years old. Why are you in the forest by yourself? What are you trying to do?" And Dhruva explained everything that happened to him. And Narada Muni said, "This is the age that you should play. You're only 5 years old. Why are you trying to do this? Your ambition is too great. I don't think it's possible for you. Just forget everything, go back, and just be like a child in your father's palace. Just play and have fun." But Dhruva said, Unfortunately, right now, I'm not in the position to accept your instructions, so please forgive me for that. But if you know of any way through which I can meet the Lord, I can meet Krishna, and I can ask him for this benediction, please advise me. So, as I mentioned before, his name was Dhruva, so he had determination. He persevered, and Narada Muni was very impressed by this determination. And he said that, okay, I will tell you the method by which you can approach the Lord. So it's a very extensive process, but I have a few instructions that Narada Muni gave to Dhruva. So Dhruva was required to go to the banks of the Yamuna River, which is one of the most sacred rivers in India. He was to take 3 baths there every day and offer forest flowers, fruits, and vegetables to the physical form of the Lord Krishna, which he crafted with the mud and the clay in the forest. And he was to meditate on the form of the Lord within the heart, which is called the Paramatma. And Narada Muni gives a very beautiful description of how he looks and how he's compassionate to all of his devotees. I have a picture right here. He has 4 hands. In one hand, he has a wheel, conch shell, lotus flower, and club. He has very beautiful garments, and he's wearing a flower garland. He has very beautiful eyes like lotus petals, and there's a very beautiful description, but I won't go further into that. Can everyone see the picture that I'm showing?
Yes, Sugopi, we have it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so first, Dhruva ate fruits only every 3 days to keep himself alive. Then later he changed to eating only leaves and grass every 6 days. Eventually, by the 5th month of his meditation, he stood on one leg and he was surviving only by air, fully concentrated on the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Narada described. And throughout this process, he was chanting this mantra that Narada gave to him, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So with full concentration, he was meditating on the form of the Lord within his heart and also chanting this mantra. And suddenly, one day, his vision inside of his heart and his mind of this picture I'm showing you of the Supreme Lord, it vanished. So he got a little disturbed and he opened his eyes. And this was the 6th month of his meditation. But what was in front of him? It was the Lord himself. The Lord had appeared because of his great austerities and his determination. So the Lord came, and Dhruva was very overwhelmed with joy, and he was very, he offered great prayers to the Lord, and he fell on the floor to offer his respects, as you can see in this picture. And the Lord said, very pleased with his austerity, the Lord said, My dear Dhruva, I shall award you the glowing planet known as the pole star, which will continue to exist even after the dissolution at the end of the millennium. No one has ever ruled this planet, which is surrounded by all the solar systems, planets, and stars. So through 6 months of vigorous meditation, Dhruva could accomplish his goal of gaining this planet, which was even greater than the kingdom of his great-grandfather. And so for 36,000 years, Dhruva ruled this planet, and at the end, he attained the ultimate reconnection to the Lord by attaining his abode and going back to the spiritual world, from where we all came. So through this story, God reciprocated with Dhruva in 2 ways. From without, he reciprocated with him through the spiritual master, through Narada Muni. So even for us, we need a spiritual guide who will help us through this process of what we call Krishna consciousness, which means remembering Krishna all the time, who will help us, guide us through our struggles, and give us the knowledge through which we can practice this process. And then Dhruva was also helped from within, with the form that he was meditating on, who was the Supreme Personality of Godhead within his heart. So sometimes we call this the sixth sense. Sometimes we feel like, oh, what I'm doing is just not right, or I really should do this. And what the sixth sense is it's actually the Paramatma. But to even become aware of the Paramatma, to become aware of his instructions to us, we need a spiritual master. As I talked about early on about the chanting of the mantra and how through millions of lives we have accumulated dust within our hearts. There's a verse in our scriptures which says, Cheto darpanamarjanam bhavamahadavagni nirvapanam Shreya kairava chandrika vitaranam Vidyavadhu jivanam Anandambudhivardhanam Pratipadam Purnamrita swadanam Sarvatma sapanam param vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. So in one part of this verse, it says that this chanting of the names of the Lord cleanses our heart of that dust that we have accumulated for years and years, and it purifies it. So once we chant and we purify our hearts, and also with the help of the spiritual master that we have, we can really recognize the presence of the Paramatma and become aware of what he is trying to tell us. So by utilizing these various methods to fix our consciousness on God and always remember him through the guidance of the spiritual master, we can ultimately guarantee our ultimate reunion with God at the time of our deaths. When if we remember him, then we can go back to the spiritual world and be his servants again and be eternally blissful, knowledgeable like him. And Krishna confirms this personally in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram ya prayati samadbhavam nati astyatra samshaya. And he says, and whoever at the end of his life quits his body remembering me, alone at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. So I would like to tell a little bit about myself. I forgot to do this at the beginning. My name is Sugopi Palakala, and I'm pursuing a bachelor's in history at Boise State University, and my special interest is religious history. So even though I read scripture since I was small, I'm 15 right now, going to college has helped me dive deeper into those scriptures and analyze them and understand them better. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity that Jill gave me to present here. Now I would just like to do 5 minutes of Kirtan, which I've mentioned at the beginning, the musical way of connecting to God. And then after that, I'll take any questions that anyone may have. I'll stop sharing. Can everyone hear the harmonium well?
Yes, we hear you playing the harmonium.
Okay. Rama Thank you, everyone. So now I'll look at the questions and try to answer.
I have them written down if it would help, Sugopi.
Okay, sure. That would help.
Okay, the first question is why 108 beads on the mala?
Okay, so 108 is considered to be a very auspicious number in our tradition. Just to give a few examples, Krishna is considered a cowherd boy in one of his pastimes. He used to have 108 groups of cows. And then he, in addition to the feminine energy of the Lord, he has other consorts. So he has 108 gopis. And so in this way, 108 is considered to be a very auspicious number. So many things related to Krishna are with the number 108. And that's why we have 108 beads too on our prayer beads.
So can you tell us what Sugopi means?
Sure. So I just mentioned that Krishna has 108 consorts. Each one of them is called a gopi. And Su is a prefix in Sanskrit that means good, or the best. So the best gopi is his feminine energy, which is Hara, which I just mentioned at the beginning of my presentation. Her name is also Radharani, so that's one of her names.
Can you tell us what the main reason for all of your prayers to be sung is?
The main reason, I think it's the same thing as I mentioned before, is calling out to the Lord and trying to get his attention to come protect us. And besides this, we have other bhajans that we sing. They basically outline our philosophy, like we're not these bodies and we're the spirit souls and we need to go back to the Lord. So it's either calling out to the Lord or it's also just a musical way of reminding ourselves of the philosophy. Also, we glorify the saints in our tradition with various songs. So there are different purposes, but the main purpose is just glorification of either the Lord or his devotees.
Sugopi, let's see, is all of your music in your culture religion-based? Excuse me, is all music in your culture or religion based on prayer?
Yes, so all music has meaning to it. We don't play really just instruments. The instruments are just meant to enhance the prayer itself, but the main thing is the prayer. So one thing that we always make sure is that the music shouldn't overshadow the singer singing, because that's the main thing that we're focusing on.
Sugopi, I know down at the temple in Boise, you serve a big meal every Sunday, a vegetarian meal for all of the people in your community. Can you tell us some more about that?
Sure. So, literally, prasadam means mercy. So we call all our food prasadam. So we first offer it to the Lord, and then we take it ourselves. So that's another means of purification, of cleaning the dust on our hearts, is eating sanctified food. So serious practitioners of the Hare Krishna movement, they only eat food that's offered to Krishna. And he only eats vegetarian food, so we also only eat vegetarian food. And we, as an act of, one of our principles is exchanging and receiving food between all the members. So we always make sure. The founder established this Sunday Love Feast, which happens in all ISKCON centers around the world, where we share food with everyone who comes. Sanctified food called prasadam.
So is anyone from the public welcome to come down to the temple on a Sunday and participate in your service and eat some of your prasadam?
Yes, anyone can come.
Is there anything else you want to share before we come to our last speaker, Sugopi?
I just want to say thank you to you and everyone else for listening to me, and I appreciate the opportunity to hear from everyone as well. I'm finding many similarities and also interesting things that I haven't heard before, so Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Sugopi.
Thank you.
We can see you on the screen, Denver. Thank you for joining us.
I've had my screen off. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Should I begin then?
What?
I'm asking, should I begin?
Yes, go ahead and begin. Thank you.
I hate to do so because I've been enjoying what the others have said and wish they had spoken longer. I had not thought about what to say leading up to the get-together today other than I would listen and then respond. But this week I got an email that I want to read to you. This is from a woman who emailed asking this question: how do we deal with anger towards God? I'm struggling getting along with the idea that I need to praise and love and worship a God that I feel completely closed off to and forsaken and unloved. There's no connection there, and all I have inside of me is this glowing, red-hot anger, and I can't shake it. It's frustrating to listen to others saying how great God is and how easily accessible He is, because it just isn't true for some people. Some people may go their whole life without God giving them any relief or acknowledgement just because that's their trial this round. I need to know how to deal with that. I know He's real. I know He exists, but I cannot understand how God allows the pain and horrors that some people on earth go through, the terrible things that happen to children and innocent people, the unspeakable things that people do. I feel as though God is playing a game and we are all chess pieces to Him. Well, I liked Rupinder's observation that the first step in the process is a problem, because I think that is where it always begins. You have to start with a problem. Well, I intend to address that question, but I was reminded in Sugopi's comment about sunrises and sunsets are God's dress. I live in the eastern part of the city of Sandy in the Salt Lake County basin. On the east, there's a wall of mountains called the Wasatch Front. And on the west, across the other side of the valley, there's a wall of mountains, and they're called the Ochres. Because I live so close to the Wasatch Mountains, the sun will begin to shine in the valley on the Ochre Mountains far to the west, and then the sunlight will creep slowly across the valley as the sun rises to clear the Wasatch Front Mountains until finally the sunlight hits my house where I live in the far east at the foothill or at the foot of the mountain. Then when the sun sets in the evening, it disappears behind the mountains on the Ochres in the west, and then the shadow begins to grow, and it grows until it finally covers the Wasatch Mountains that I live next to. In winter time, the snow-covered Wasatch Mountains in the bright sunlight reflect so much light that it hurts your eyes to look at them. You really need to use sunglasses if you're going to spend a lot of time looking at the sunlight reflecting off the mountains. And sometimes after a snowstorm, the snow has been so thick in what it has done to cover the earth that the trees themselves are no longer green. They're just white. They look like white, jagged teeth sticking out all across the tops of the mountains, but they're white and they blend in brilliantly with this color. As the sun sets, as it goes down in the evening and disappears behind the Ochre Mountains, the shadow, the last lights of the day creep up the Wasatch Mountains to the very top, and just the highest peaks have the last bit of light on them before it disappears into shadow, everything being shadowed. But because of the angle of the sun, as it creeps up the mountain, once it gets about halfway up the mountain, the light is no longer white. It becomes pink and it becomes blue and purple and lavender and hues and shades of subtle change that are so different from one another. Sugopi mentioned that there are artists on earth, but the greatest artist is God. Watching that every night, it is never the same. It is always different, and it is always beyond the artistry of any man or woman to capture, because it is alive and it is moving. It is light itself. And the canvas that God uses is the canvas he created by the snow and by the mountain and by the creation. No artist can capture what we get to watch and see every night if we'll just open our eyes and look. Jesus Christ taught a sermon. In his sermon, he said that his Father makes the sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sends the rain on the just and on the unjust. If you love only them that love you, what reward have you? Do not even the publicans the same? If you salute your brethren only, what do you more than others? Do not even the publicans the same? You are therefore commanded to be perfect, even as your Father who is in heaven is perfect, and to love everyone. God's gift of this beautiful nightly display of brilliant color and subtle hues and artistry is a gift that's given to everyone, but it may not be a gift appreciated by hardly anyone. It is his gift to us. In the book of the Psalms, which are hymns, the Lord, he is God. It is he that made us, and not we ourselves. The Lord is good. His mercy is everlasting. His truth endures to all generations. We are part of that creation, and we belong here in this creation. And we're designed to appreciate what it is that he has done in making this creation for us. Someone asked the question, why are the prayers sung? Prayers for a community are best when they are offered in unison. But speaking in unison is very hard to accomplish without a cadence that allows people to stay on the same word at the same time with the other people who are repeating the same words of a prayer. And so one way that has been devised in order to keep prayers synchronized between various voices and have them speak the same words at the same moment is to turn them into hymns, so that everyone together can raise their voice and speak the same syllable and make the same sound at the same time. And so when Delmar Bondi beats the drum to give the cadence, and when Sugopi plays the harmonium to set the tune, what each of them are doing is a reflection of a culture that is seeking to have the prayers unified, to have the prayers united, to become one in order to express the desire of the heart of the whole, and to do it in a uniform way. The religion of God and the greatness of God is so vast and so all-encompassing that it's impossible for one person or one group or one denomination or one movement to have held on to it all. The religion began in the beginning with God standing in the presence of the first parents, who were the father and the mother of the entire race of humanity, and teaching them about everything there is to know, to worship, to understand, to appreciate, to love, to share, to feel, to understand. But we have done a bad job of preserving that. We had at the beginning the truth taught, and then we had the truth lost. The process of losing truth is called apostasy. But apostasy does not mean that everything is lost. It means that some has been lost, because anything less than all of it is less than the true religion. And so apostasy causes us to only keep parts of the religion. But all religion, in all cultures and all denominations, everywhere in the world, have a common root. From time to time, God has sent messages back into the world. Those messages are restorations in which some of what has been lost is then restored again to help complete the picture. I believe there have been many apostasies. Correspondingly, there have been many restorations. But a restoration, to complete the entire story, has to return us all the way back to the beginning. Has to give us the opportunity to have, once again, everything that was here at the start that unifies together and weaves into one great whole, all of the truths. In some of the religions that we have heard glimpses of today, there are greater truths about some characteristics than have been preserved in the Christian tradition. We need to have reunited all the truths from all the limited apostasies that nevertheless contain truths into one great restoration back into a whole, with the guidance and assistance of God. There was a sermon that was delivered by the Apostle Paul 2,000 years ago when he went to Greece to teach about the restoration that Jesus Christ had brought about. The audience that he spoke to were a group of philosophers in Greece. That culture, that nation, that society has long since perished. The temples that were built back then have fallen into disarray and many of them into dust. But the sermon that Paul taught on Mars Hill has been preserved, and we have a record of the sermon that he taught. He referred to them, he said, "You ignorantly worship God, whom I declare unto you. God made the world and all things therein. He is the Lord of heaven and earth, and dwells not in temples made with hands, neither is worshipped with men's hands as though he needed anything, seeing he gives to all life and breath and all things. He is not far from every one of us, for in him we live and move and have our being. We are also his offspring." Those words of Paul on Mars Hill are echoed even more clearly in some of the things that have been said by Delmar and by Rupinder and by Jeremiah and by Sugopi today. Sometimes we lose track of how closely connected we are, every one of us, to God. There was a king who delivered a sermon as he was ending his reign. In his old age and infirmity, he felt no longer able to provide the leadership, the guidance, and the presiding role of a king in helping bring peace to his people and serve them. And so he called his people together and he gave them his last bit of advice before resigning as the king and allowing his son to be the one who would lead the community after that by teaching and defending and helping them. And in King Benjamin's talk, like Paul, he mentioned that God has created you from the beginning and is preserving you from day to day by lending you breath, that you may live and move and do according to your own will, and even supporting you from one moment to another. The story that we have of the creation in the Bible says that God he breathed the breath of life into Adam. King Benjamin, talking thousands of years later, says that in you right now, every one of you, God is lending you breath that you may live. If you want to know how close you are in reality to God, just hold your breath. Exclude, throw away the act of breathing that God is causing to occur in you at this very moment. And hold your breath for as long as you can. Then when you take your next gasp for air, realize the power to do that is loaned to you by God. He is that intimate to you. He is that connected to you. In a revelation that was given to Joseph Smith about this creation, God, speaking to Joseph, told him that Christ is in all and through all things, the light of truth, and that truth shines. This is the light of Christ, as also he is in the sun, and the light of the sun, and the power thereof by which it was made, as also he is in the moon, and the light of the moon, and the power thereof by which it was made, as also the light of the stars, and the power thereof by which they were made, and the earth also, and the power thereof, even the earth upon which you stand. And the light which now shines, which gives you light, is through him who enlightens your eyes, which is the same light that quickens your understandings, which light proceeds forth from the presence of God to fill the immensity of space, the light which is in all things, which gives life to all things, which is the law by which all things are governed, even the power of God who sits upon his throne, who is in the bosom of eternity, who is in the midst of all things. God is everywhere. The light of God is in you. If it were not in you, you would not have the power to breathe, to think, to live, to move, and to even be sustained by God's power from moment to moment to continue in your existence. We, in this present form, are not self-existent. We are dependent upon the energy, the power, and the force of God to keep us maintained as his creation. There are components about us that are co-eternal with God, but that doesn't mean that we as an organized being existed from all eternity. God created us, but he did this long ago and far away. Concerning this creation and that same revelation, there is no space in which there is no kingdom, and there is no kingdom in which there is no space, either a greater or a lesser kingdom. And unto every kingdom is a law, and unto every law there are certain bounds also and conditions. All things are comprehended by God, and all things are before him, and all things are round about him. He is above all things, and in all things, and through all things, and is round about all things, and all things are by him, and of him, even God, forever and ever. The earth rolls upon her wings, and the sun gives his light by day, and the moon gives her light by night, and the stars also give their light as they roll upon their wings in their glory in the midst of the power of God. Unto what shall I liken these kingdoms that you may understand? Behold, all these are kingdoms, and any man who has seen any or the least of these has seen God moving in his majesty and power. The day shall come when you shall comprehend even God, being quickened in him and by him. Then shall you know that you have seen him, that I am, and that I am the true light that is in you, and that you are in me. Otherwise, you could not abound. Everything you can see, everything that you can experience, every sense that you are able to employ is a manifestation of God lending you this intelligence in order to comprehend him. When people believe themselves to be wise and smart and good and holy, we really do delude ourselves. No matter how intelligent we may think ourselves, the fact is we know practically nothing. And we will only be here a short time period. God is everywhere and in everything, and we should be in awe of him. Using everything that we have the ability to assemble, using all of our science, using all of our finest instrumentation, using every mechanism that we can devise. We know that approximately 68% of the energy in the universe is what is called dark energy. It's called dark energy because we know it's there. We haven't a clue what it is. Using that same science and ability and instrumentation, we know that 27% of the universe is comprised of dark matter. We know it's there because physics suggests its presence. We don't have a clue what it is. The total of these two means that 95% of the universe we can detect is composed of things we cannot see, we cannot understand, we cannot comprehend. We detect and comprehend at best only 5% of all that exists using our best science and best instruments to examine the universe. On this world, just this world, depending upon the degree of humility that we acknowledge about our present understanding, we may only know of somewhere between 1% and 14% of the life forms that exist on this planet. Of the known life forms that we know about, humanity makes up no more than 1/100th of 1% of that life. If we are not in awe of God, then we have an awfully small universe and an awfully large ego and an awfully ignorant vantage point. The greatness of the religions that we have heard from today, from the very first with Delmar, through the last we heard from, is that the approach of the religion is the acknowledgement of something far greater than ourselves and the sense of awe and humility that we approach that greatness that is beyond us. God may make himself known from time to time, but even when he does so, it's difficult for, first of all, man to take it in, and then having taken it in, difficult for man to comprehend what it is that has been given to him and taken in. And then it is something altogether more challenging and more difficult to turn that into something that can be explained, even in part. But the greatest challenge is then to comprehend enough in order to be able to teach it. We've had great teachers in many religions, but I think it is foolish to suggest that the greatest teachers that have been out there have ever been able to adequately convey what it is that they took in, because the challenge is too vast. I liked the reference that Delmar made to his grandparents who were involved in ceremonial worship and ceremonial tradition. I understand why Rupinder says at some point along the path of progression, you reach a point at which you no longer need ritual or ceremony. But the fact is that some kinds of vast information can be conveyed in the way that Jeremiah conveyed it, by telling a story, by giving a tradition. The story has embedded it within it symbols that are expansive, that grow outward, that have more meaning than simply the wolf, more meaning than simply the moon, more meaning than simply the paint on the face. They have a library of material that you're trying to convey in a shorthanded way. And so the ceremony that our Delmar Bondi's grandparents conveyed to him when he was a youth were not simply theater. They were an attempt to take a large amount of information and to compress it into a handful of symbols, and then to deliver the handful of symbols so that someone who takes it in can then look at and reflect upon that handful of symbols, and to say, within this symbol, I see this entire library of material. And within this symbol, I see this library of material. And within that one. And so ritual becomes one of the ways in which religion is intended to strike the chord in the heart and convey into the mind and into the senses that you can take information in, something that is beyond merely the senses that we work with, something that reaches out into the universe and touches that infinite. There is this concept that Christians speak about that's called the Holy Ghost. It's also called the Comforter. That Holy Ghost, that concept, much abused in Christianity, much misunderstood, much voiced about, a lot of silly notions. But in part of the restoration of information that has come about in these last 2 centuries, because we believe that God is continuously trying to restore. One of the things that we've been given in the last 2 centuries is a description of what that Holy Ghost includes. Let me read those words to you. It is given to abide in you the record of heaven, the Comforter, the peaceable things of immortal glory, the truth of all things, that which quickeneth all things, that which maketh alive all things, that which knoweth all things, and hath all power, according to wisdom, mercy, truth, justice, and judgment. That is the Holy Ghost, that when we allow ourselves to quiet down, when we allow ourselves to take in, when we recognize the breath that we rely upon to remain conscious, when we realize that the colors that we behold with our eyes are loaned to us as a sensibility given to us by God, at that moment, you're connecting to God. At that moment, He is present with you. At that moment, you should be in awe of Him sharing with you that capacity, because He is with you. So when the woman is struggling, getting along with the idea that she needs to praise and love and worship a God I feel completely closed off to and forsaken and unloved, the place to begin is to recognize it's an expression of God's love to you that you can see. It's an expression of God's love, kindness, and generosity to you that you can breathe. It's an expression of God's love, kindness, and sustaining power, that He makes the rain to fall and the sun to shine on both the good and the evil. It's an expression of His love and His presence with you, that you have the opportunity to be here, to be part of a family, to be connected with others, to converse and to eat and to feel love and to feel kindness. The problem is not that you're not connected to God, because every one of us is. The problem is that the foolish religious tradition that you have been taught shuts your mind down so that you do not comprehend His presence in you, His presence with you, and His presence in this world that you now occupy. The pictures of the birds that were put up by Sugopi reminded me, I try to hike every day. My wife and I go out, and in winter, nature has very few of the birds around that we see here during the summer. The songbirds come and go, the butterflies come and go, but winter has its own dress, has its own coloration, has its own beauty. We've waded through snowdrifts up to our thighs, and we've heard the stirring of animals that are underneath the layer of snow, small mammals that crawl around underneath there. We've seen the predator birds that stay around during wintertime, that will listen keenly to locate their prey and will then fly into and be beneath the surface, the surface of the snow, in order to catch their prey and in order to survive in the winter months. And then in the summer, when the flowers are blossoming, the return of the butterflies and the hummingbirds that eat on nectar, and the bees and the other life that are less dependent upon the loss of lives of their fellow creatures, and instead eat in the vegetable world and survive sometimes on nothing more than nectar. A land flowing with milk and honey was what was promised anciently to Israel. Milk and honey do not require the death of anything. they're produced as a symbol of the abundance of life, the promise of life. When the ancient Israelites built a temple in the land of Jerusalem, they had waited generations to build it because their holy place was really a tent, a tabernacle. It was portable and they moved it from place to place. But they finally built a fixed location for their temple in the city of Jerusalem. They built the temple on a hilltop previously occupied by the Jebusites that was not actually acquired under the jurisdiction of Israel until the reign of King David. They'd been living there for generations, but the Jebusites retained it. King David, in the final attempt to conquer that site, said whoever was first over the wall would become the captain of the Lord's host, hoping to displace his nephew, Joab, who was the only person contemporaneous with David that scared David and frightened him. And he was hoping that someone would be over the wall first, and maybe he could get a new captain of the Lord's host and be rid of his nephew. But Joab was the first one over the wall and conquered the final stronghold. And so the site on which the temple would be built was obtained by Israel. David thought that he would be the one to build it, but the Lord told him, no, you're too bloody a man. You've shed too many lives. You've done too many things that disqualify you. And so while David could gather the materials, the Lord commanded him not to be the one to build it. It was his son who built it. And so Solomon built the temple, finally a brick and mortar building that would house the oracles of God and be the holy place that people came for festivals and worship and sacrifices. Well, it was built on a prominence, the former stronghold of the Jebusites. It was built on the prominence. And to the east was the Mount of Olives. The sunrise in the east in Jerusalem anciently would rise as the sun came, and the sun would then, as it does here in this valley, it would then start and creep down until the sun cleared the mountain, and then it was visible everywhere. The eastern wall of the temple that was built by Solomon had overlaid on it gold, a thin layer of gold, but it was gold on the eastern face. So as the sun crept up from the east, the sun on the top of the eastern face of the temple would reflect that sunlight in the gold on the temple as the sun rose. And so for some period of time, every morning as the sun rose in the east, there would be a time when you could not see the sun because it was blocked from view by the Mount of Olives, but you could see the reflection of the sun in the gold on the temple, and it would appear as though the day was beginning with the sun shining from the house of God as the sun returned and light returned each day to the earth. It's just a symbol, but it tied together in symbolic form the presence of God, the ceremonies, the rituals, the traditions that remind us, that attempt to preserve for us information so that even in our apostate states, wherever we are, in whatever state of apostasy we may find ourselves, we can have hope that God will renew that, and that light of understanding will increase and will grow brighter and brighter until at last we return again to a perfect day, a day in which there is no darkness, a day in which there are no shadows left around the edges of our religion, no more separation and division because the shadow does not illuminate the truth that we hold dear in our hearts, because that also is returned again, renewed again, restored again. And we find ourselves in a vigorous relationship, connected to one another, because a faith that is big enough to incorporate all truths from all sources becomes big enough also to connect us to one another. It's in that search and that desire for restoration that we all have hope of returning once again and finding that we all stand on common ground. In fact, we all stand on the same ground. Now, I've seen various agendas for today, but my understanding is that we're supposed to end this at noon, and I hate to impose upon people by dragging something out longer than what they had planned to participate in. There's like 2 minutes left until noon. Is there any, are there any questions that I ought to take a look at before we wrap this up?
Yes, we have just a couple of questions that you might be able to answer. I guess first, can you please tell us a little bit about your spiritual background and what scriptures you're quoting from? Because I didn't really introduce the speakers.
Oh yeah, I'm an excommunicated Mormon, I suppose. I'm a free-range, non-denominational believer in God's work in all ages at all times, and I believe that God did something in the life of Jesus Christ to bring about truth. I believe that became corrupted sometime after the death of Jesus Christ, and that Christianity preserved and perpetuated an echo, but not the fulsome thing. I believe that Martin Luther was inspired by God to rebel against Catholicism because Catholicism had become oppressive. And Martin Luther's rebellion against Catholicism not only helped free people from the tyranny of Roman Catholicism, it helped Roman Catholicism repent and return and improve itself. As much as Martin Luther did to help spawn a new kind of interpretation of Christianity that allowed people to believe in Christ and feel themselves connected to God outside of the institution of Roman Catholicism, Roman Catholicism itself looked at the problems that Martin Luther criticized and underwent internal improvement, internal correction, internal growth. It was a inspired moment that helped all of Christianity. I believe that led in turn to ultimately refugees fleeing Europe and coming to the Americas in order to get religious freedom. Because the Protestant Reformation did not result in the freedom of religion. It resulted in Lutheran nations and Catholic nations and Church of England nations. And those nations all had, by force of arms, government-imposed religion in which some forms of belief were favored and some were disfavored, and some of the disfavored were not only persecuted, they were killed. John Knox, the apostle of murder, was responsible for murdering people that he had religious disagreements with. Protestant fathers practiced Christianity in rebellion against Rome, but mirroring many of the very same things they hated about Rome. And so when the Americas were discovered, there were many people that left their European nations to migrate to the Americas precisely because they wanted to practice worship of God without someone forcing them to. And so one of the very first things that once the Americas rebelled and got their independence, one of the very first things they did after establishing their government was to mandate the freedom to practice religion according to the dictates of their own conscience, so that everyone could believe and worship according to the dictates of their own belief, their own connection to God. And so it took all of these events to move forward in order for God to then have the ability to do something about Christianity to correct it again. In 1805, he sent into the world a young man through whom he would begin this process of restoring and repairing. That young man had a common name, Joseph Smith, and I believe that through him, a restoration of the truth began. That restoration is today, it's called Mormonism by most people, but Mormonism itself is fractured into some 80 different kinds of denominations. Mormonism is not unified. Mormonism is a fracture. It's much like what you see with Roman Catholicism and Protestantism and all of the offshoots of Protestantism. There's many, many different forms of Mormonism. God spoke to Joseph Smith. I have a friend, I've written a number of books. I have a friend, I met him because he read the first book I wrote. He grew up a Mormon, he was a Mormon missionary, and he got to the point in his Mormonism that he felt like it was no longer satisfying to the soul. So he undertook a journey to try and find enlightenment. He went to India, he studied in India, he found a guru, he got his enlightenment and his understanding there. And then after he had spent years in India, he returned and he came back because his roots were in Utah. He came back to Utah. But upon returning to Utah, what he found, to his surprise, was that contained within many of the revelations given to Joseph Smith, there were concepts about enlightenment he had to go to India to discover, but he found it back here. He read my book and he contacted me and he said, I don't understand how you were able to find it in Mormonism. It took me leaving it and coming back before I could find what there was that was within it. I became a member of the particular kind of Mormonism that's called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or LDS. I was a member of that church for 40 years, to the exact day. And on the 40th year anniversary to the day, I was excommunicated from the church because I do not believe it is possible to have an authentic relationship with God and to also be subordinate to hierarchical control, administrative enforcement, and surrendering to someone else who exercises authority over you. And so, excommunicated from Mormonism because of the things which I teach, but I base what I believe upon the Bible, the Book of Mormon, which was translated by Joseph Smith from an ancient book, and revelations that have been given by God to Joseph Smith. And because those things have led me to connect to God. I believe in revelations that God has also given to me. But I don't stand at the head of any organization. I believe I am one among a group of equals, of people who are likewise searching to try to find authentic connection to God. Because I believe that God is in and with and around all of us. It's hard to convey adequately how closely connected we are all to God using only concepts that are found in Christianity and in Mormonism. It's easier when you appeal to and you incorporate also some of the concepts that we have heard today from an Apache, from Rupinder and his exposition, from Jeremiah, the Blackfoot storyteller, and from Sugopi. There are things that they have said that come straight out of the scriptures that have been restored to us, but are concepts that we do not adequately express, even though our scriptures contain them. We need others who come from a Sikh background or from a Hare Krishna background to articulate and to put into words these vast concepts. I am someone trying to understand and to teach truth with a recognition that the greatness of God dwarfs the capacity of any man to adequately convey to another. The best that we can do is to invite and to persuade and to say and to deliver constantly the message. Come and see for yourself. I believe that God will reveal himself to everyone. The way in which he may reveal himself at first may be very limited. It may be very small. But we ought to appreciate even that. And we ought to prize even that. By the time a person is given the opportunity to stand in the presence of God, they're not standing in the presence of God because God is trying to impress them or because God is trying to give them greater faith in him. It's because in all of the little ways in which God has previously revealed and made himself known, the person has accepted with deep appreciation and humility and come to the recognition that we are all really utterly dependent upon him. None of us are great. The best we can offer is our submission and our humble support to God and our fellow men, because God cares as much for each one of us as he cares for any one of us. And so none of us can say we're great, we're good, we're holy. Should God make us holy for even a moment so that we can endure his presence, that's a gift from him. And it departs because when we are no longer in his presence, this earth drags us down. We get tired, we get cold, we get hungry. We have to constantly war against the elements of this world. And so every one of us ought to stand in awe continually of God and who he is. All I am is someone trying to promote faith and confidence in the existence of, the worthiness of, the greatness of, and our dependence upon God.
Thank you so much for that answer, Denver. I know you are very considerate of others' time. I was wondering if you have time for one more question, or if you'd like to end now.
Yeah, we're only 11 minutes over. Yeah, go ahead.
In your view, will the restoration of all be accomplished by a single person or a group? Will it require concurrent restorations among many religions, eventually all uniting together as one?
There's a prophecy about how God intends to gather together into one in the last days, and how there are going to be, according to the Book of Mormon, it's a testimony of God's dealings with one group of ancient people. But the Book of Mormon makes it clear that God's dealings have not been limited to one or two groups, but there have been multiple groups to whom he has visited and provided information. The testimony of all of those are intended to grow together. The Book of Mormon confirms that that is ultimately an objective. Prophecies require that there be a house built, that there be a people gathered, that there be a location where God can take up his abode. The earth ultimately is going to be redeemed and returned to an original state that was described in Scripture as being a new creation in which there was a garden planted eastward in Eden, in which God could come and he could visit directly face to face with man. The purpose of a temple is to construct another prototype that is symbolically representative of that same condition, in which it is possible for angels, God, men, the living and the dead to be reunited as a single spot, from which a restoration and a return of everything will spread until it finally fills the whole earth. But it begins in a single spot, at a single place. My understanding of how that's going to come about is that a command will at some point be given about a location. A command will be given at some point about the facility. Direction will be provided in order to put that into motion so it exists on the earth. And as with so many of the prophecies that God has given, we tend to view them vast and macro, and God tends to fulfill them small and micro. The coming of Jesus Christ into this world was, on a global basis, almost inconsequential to the notice of mankind. It appears that the largest audience that we can confirm that Jesus Christ ever spoke to was about 7,000 people. It appears that most of them turned away from him because of his doctrine, because of his teaching, because of what he was insisting the truth to include. It appears that by the time he gets to the end of his ministry, he is slain on the cross, and then he is resurrected from the dead, and he ministers for a period of about 40 days in and around Jerusalem. Then he ascends into heaven. That at the moment of his ascension into heaven, that his followers at that point were approximately 500 people. So the Lord Jesus Christ comes into the world as nothing more than sort of a local disturber of the peace. And by the time that he has finished his ministry, he's resurrected and ascends into heaven, he has about 500 followers. If you look at the scriptural prophecies, the symbols embedded in the law of Moses, the foreshadowing of a paschal lamb that would be slain in order to rescue and save mankind, if you look at what Isaiah foretold, what the Psalms celebrated, if you look at the vast body of literature, and then you compare that to the fulfillment of all that in the life of Christ, it would be very easy, if you're being fair about it, to take a look at that and to say, God fulfills his great designs in very small ways. And so, in some ways, the easiest way for God to get his work done is for the world to give little heed or little notice of it until it has been completed. No man yet ever built a temple alone. It just is beyond the capacity of a single individual to do. And so there has to be a temple building people, if for no other reason than to support the cost of what it would take to build a temple. Even if you, like Solomon, used professional builders from King Tyre to send down to construct the temple because the expertise did not exist among the Israelites to accomplish the work. You still had to have the Israelites to support the budget that King Solomon had to employ in order to pay the king, in order to bring the people and the material to accomplish the work. Even if it's done with small professional labor, it's still going to fulfill the prophecies. It's still going to meet all of the criteria that has been given in Scripture, and it's still going to accomplish everything that has been promised to all people. How we then gather together all of what are called in Scripture the rich treasures from the earth. Those rich treasures from the earth are not rubies and diamonds and gold and silver. They're the records of truth. They're the truths found in the traditions and the religions. One of the things that's required in the design of the temple is that there be a treasury. But the word treasury, the room is viewed by some people as having money and gold and silver and value. It's not that. The treasury of the temple are where the records are kept. It's where the greatest truths are to be housed. They're a place for preserving the great truths that God has planted around the earth that are to be gathered together so that there is one place that houses the most valuable thing that we have. It was not the marble temples on Mars Hill that endured. That's not where the treasure was found when the Apostle Paul spoke to the Greek philosophers. It was in the truth that was taught by Paul in the sermon he delivered on Mars Hill. All those people have long since been reduced to dust, and yet the sermon has been preserved. That's the treasure. That's what needs to be gathered. Okay. Now we're 20 minutes over, so we should wrap up. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Denver, for speaking today. I'd like to thank all of the speakers who came and shared with us the treasures that they have from their spiritual path with God. This will be recorded and shared on YouTube as soon as we can get it up, and also at restorationarchives.com. If anyone has any questions in the meantime about some of these speakers, or maybe how to get in contact with them, you can email me at jillvanharen@msn.com, JILLVANHAREN. And we're going to close up right now with our closing prayer that will be given by Brian Zhang.
We each come to petition the highest power in the universe as we see things in our own faith traditions. Oh God, we may have some different views about you, but we've sought to find out where our views are similar and to share and learn from each other as well. We have found out that in many ways we are not so different after all. We ask you to benefit us in our search for unity and bless our departure in peace as friends. As a student, I ask this, O great Creator, in the name of the teacher Jesus Christ, whom I recognize as your Son. But in saying this, I allow all others to worship you how they please. So let this be the case, and how each person closes this prayer in their hearts when we say, Amen.